Hello, my most amazing artists. How are you today? I hope you guys had a really great time working on the Rolodex activities. I know I did, and I would love to see what you came up with. So if your parents haven't already done it, have them send me a picture of what you created. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. It's more of a game, and it's all about the elements of art. Now, some of the classes this year have gotten a chance to talk about the elements of art, but there's a lot of you that haven't, and so I thought this would be a good time to introduce you to the elements of art. The elements of art are the foundational pieces of a piece of art. It's what art is made of, and there are 7 elements that we'll be talking about today: line, color, shape, form, space, value, and texture. That might not mean a lot to you right now, but hold on and you'll be learning all about those elements today. The first element I want to talk to you about is line. Artists use many different types of lines in their paintings to tell many different stories. You can see in this painting there are lots of curvy or wavy lines. They kind of guide your eye all over the painting and bring lots of emotion in this painting. In the next painting I want to show you, there are many straight lines, and they all seem to be pointing to young George Washington, and it's a way of having the artist show you what they want you to see. There are lots of lines on the building, on the arms, on the tree that are guiding your eye right to the young boy. Color is the next element I want to talk to you about. Artists use colors in so many different ways in their art. Colors bring forth lots of emotion, and so if an artist wants you to feel happy and excited, they might choose a lot of bright colors, some bright reds or blues or yellows, and if they want you to feel sad or lonely or afraid, then they might choose some dark colors. And so colors really help tell the story of a painting besides just what is drawn on the canvas. Shape is the next element I want to talk to you about. There are several different types of shapes that artists might use in their painting. This is a great example by Picasso. He uses many geometric shapes. A geometric shape is a shape that you might recognize as a square or a triangle or a circle, and it is a shape that can be defined. Now, the next painting I want to show you is one that's using a lot of organic shapes. Organic shapes are shapes that come purely out of your imagination or from nature, but they're not shapes that have specific names and can't really be defined or measured. Okay, form is next. Form is an object that has a 3-dimensional aspect to it versus just a shape which is flat and 2-dimensional. I especially love this painting because there are many different forms. The artist actually uses a sphere, which is a 3-dimensional shape, to create a painting of a woman. So if you want to go back and look at that one more time, I highly advise it, because at first you might only see the spheres, but when you look very closely, you will actually see, again, a painting of a woman. Space is next, and this is actually one of my favorite elements. If you'll notice in this particular painting, the artist has painted it in such a way that it looks like there's lots and lots of space on the canvas. There are people standing close to you on the beach, and then you can also tell that there are people in the background or in the distance out in the water. And it's just a flat piece of paper or a flat piece of canvas that the artist is painting on, but because he or she has changed the size of the person, then it makes one person look closer and another person look far away. Value is next, and what value means is using lighter versions and darker versions of a color, and that also helps to create depth and dimension. You can see here that the artist has used a pink color that they've added white to over on the left side, and so that is an example of value. And then on the woman's dress there are darker purples and lighter purples, and that is also a great example of value. If space is my favorite element, I would say texture is a close second. Artists use textures in their paintings to give you something, to give your eyes something interesting to look at. Artists can use actual texture, such as in this first painting, where they've put paint on in a very thick way that is, if you were to reach out and feel it, it would actually feel bumpy. And so that gives one form of texture to look at. And in this next painting, if you felt the painting, it would actually be very flat. But this is visual texture because the artist has painted texture into the painting. You can see the texture of the man's beard, and you can also see the texture of his fur coat. But again, if you were to touch it, it would just be flat canvas. Okay, now that you've had a chance to see some examples of the elements of art in actual art, we're going to play a game to see if you can find some examples around your house. What you will need to do to start with is get a piece of paper. Any kind of paper will do. I have a piece of just plain white printer paper. And I need for you to fold that paper in half and then in half again. And when you open it, you should have 4 sections on the front and 4 sections on the back. In the very first section, I want you to label it line. That will be the first element of art that we will look for. As I looked around my home, I actually found several different examples of line. The first was on my shoe. You can see that my shoe has many different lines. The sole of the shoe creates a line. The silver lines on the side were what first got my attention. The laces actually are made up of lines, and the area that goes right around the front and the ankle. So lots and lots of lines to choose from if I wanted to draw any of these lines. I also found an old set of earbuds. Yes, this whole curly cord here is just a bunch of lines. You could even do a plate of spaghetti if you had that for dinner last night. The one that I think I will draw is this small little easel. It has also many lines that are very easy to recognize. Some horizontal lines, some diagonal lines, and well, there's another horizontal line, and when it's closed, there's a vertical line right in the middle. So I'm going to set this up and just try my best to draw it. There's a very quick version of my miniature easel with the diagonal lines, the vertical lines, and the horizontal lines. If I wanted to do my earbuds, that would be kind of fun too. Really, it's just a bunch of curves with my little earbuds on the side. So that would have been fun too. All right, and that is line. The next one that I'll do is shape. I found this packet of vitamins, which, by the way, I hope you're doing all the things you can to stay healthy. But I found this packet of vitamins, and it is a geometric shape because it's a very recognizable rectangular shape. So if I wanted to draw this packet of vitamins, I would just do a basic rectangular shape. It's got a little rectangle in the middle, and then it's also got some lines. Now the cool thing about looking for elements of art in your home is that usually with any shape, there will never just be one element represented. So for instance, in this particular vitamin shape, there's color, there's texture, there's form, there's shape, but I am choosing to use this for shape. Another example of shape is this rock I found. My sister has a hobby of painting rocks, and you might recognize this character that she painted. This is called an organic shape. Organic shape is something that is not necessarily recognizable as a geometric shape, but it's just created naturally. So it's round, it's sort of triangular, but there's no real description of this shape, so it would just be considered an organic shape. If I wanted to draw this organic shape, I might just do a rounded top, a rounded edge, kind of a curve on the bottom. So this is an example of an organic shape. Another element of art that we're going to talk about is color. Color is everywhere. Any of these items that I chose so far could be a representative of color because most everything in your house does contain some type of color. This is the example that I chose though. This is just a coaster that you might put a drink on, and I chose this because it has lots of really pretty colors. It just jumped out at me as being quite a colorful piece that's in my home. A circle, which is a shape. So there again, this isn't just one particular element of art, but there's just one that I'm going to focus on. And I'm not going to recreate it exactly, but I think it would just be fun to try to capture the same colors. All right, now as you can see, that is not exactly what's shown here on this coaster, but I just wanted to get a basic capture of the colors just for a practice. So on the next element of art, we're going to be talking about value. Value is a little bit tricky. It's just talking about the lights and the darks of an item, of an object, or of a piece of art. And you can create a lighter version of a color by adding white, or a darker version of a color by adding black. And that spectrum of color is called value. I found a couple of examples. This tissue box here, you can see that it uses a darker version of purple and a lighter version of purple. And this was probably created by using this purple and adding a little bit of white, and they were able to get this variation on the purple. Another example of value would be using an item like this egg. Now this is not a real egg, it's made of marble, but the thing about it is it's all one color. It is completely white, but when I put it in the light, then value is created from the light reflecting off of it, and the absence of light created a shadow. So if I wanted to draw this egg, that would be a much more difficult object to try to recreate. But I could get a pretty good likeness by trying to find the dark places of the egg. I know that underneath it's darker because of shadow that's been created. Under here is a very dark area which is completely shadowed on the table. So I could show the shadow on the table. There's shadow under here. And then even up here where it starts to go back around, it also gets shaded. It's a little bit darker. And then up here, that's where the light is hitting it. So that's gonna be the lightest area. And then this area is just a little bit darker, but not quite as dark as underneath. Now, this is a very fast, very messy representation, but this gives you an idea of how value can be created using just light on an object. Okay. And then as a quick reminder, value can also be created by adding white or black to your paint to create lighter and darker. That's how you might do it in your paintings. All right, the next element of art that we're going to talk about is form. And as I told you, when you're finding your objects, rarely will your object only include one element of art. So I'm going to go back to this tissue box. This tissue box is an excellent example of form, very defined three-dimensional aspect to it, and it's one that's not too difficult to recreate. So if I were going to try to draw this tissue box, what I might do is draw the front of the box because I can see that very clearly. Okay, when I'm looking at it from my perspective, I can't see the bottom of the box at all. I can see a little bit of the right side. Not a lot. And I can see a little bit of the top. And I can see it has a hole in the middle and a tissue coming out the top. So that is my quick example of form. All right, my next example is going to be texture. Texture is a fun one because texture is the way something feels. So most every single item that I've looked at so far has some sort of texture, but some of it is more recognizable visually than others. So with this rock, you can look at it and you can tell the texture just by looking because your brain sees all these little holes. Your brain sort of understands what a rock feels like and can imagine how this might feel. But this isn't the texture I want to draw. Let's see if we can find another example of texture somewhere around my home. I think I found the perfect item for texture. What do you think? Can't you just tell how she might feel by just looking at her? You can see all the fluffiness, all the fuzziness. There's lots and lots of texture all over this little thing. Can you say hi? So we'll try to see if we can recreate that texture. All right, that was a nice surprise. When I found Lola laying on the chair, I thought that's the perfect example of texture. So I took my paper with me and I did a quick sketch while I was looking at her. This is not an easy texture, and so I'm not looking for perfection here. This is just a practice. But basically, to show the texture, I have bumpy lines that go around her head because her hair is kind of all over the place. I might do some swoops here and there, some small lines just to get an idea of her fur, that it's going in lots of different directions. And so this is just a quick example of just practicing what it might be like to create texture using pencil and paintbrush and paper. All you're trying to do is just capture the idea of an object's texture. All right, so what I wanted to do here is show that her head is laying on a pillow. So I did color in the pillow, but I tried to do it with much smoother lines because the pillow is very smooth and I wanted her to look very frizzy and fluffy in comparison to that pillow. So you can see that I made much different lines when I was trying to draw her than when I was drawing this pillow. All right, the very last example of an element of art that we're going to use today is called space. And space can be a little bit tricky when you're trying to use it in your art, and that's because your paper is just two-dimensional, and so it is impossible to actually create space between objects. So what we can do is use the size of the object to give the idea of space. So let me show you an example I found at my house. All right, here's a great example of space. Now this is actual space, but in your art you can create space by changing the size of an object. So the candlestick that is near me is much larger than the candlestick that is far away from me. Can you see the candlestick over here on the table? This one here? It looks much smaller because it's farther away from me. So if I wanted to recreate this on my paper, the one I want to be close to me, I would make very large. The one I want to be farther from me, I would make much smaller. All right, what I'd like to do now is recreate the space between those candlesticks here on my paper. And as I mentioned before, the paper is two-dimensional, so there's no way to actually create that much space. So what I can do is just change the size. So if I were going to show a candle up here, close by, then what I might do is show that it is rather large. And then if I wanted to show one that looked farther back in the room, then what I might do is draw a much smaller table. And then a much smaller candlestick. And what you'll find is that you can't put as much detail in the candle when it's farther away because your eye actually can't see it very well, and it's harder to do smaller. But there's an example of how you might create space in your art by just making one item smaller than the other. This last space on your paper, what I would like for you to do is choose some of the elements of art that you found to create a picture. Maybe you, in your picture, you might want to use an example of space to make one item appear closer than another. You might want to use some texture or some form, maybe an organic or a geometric shape. It's up to you, but can you combine some of those elements into one picture and recreate it right here on this last square? I would love to see what you guys create, so please have your parents take pictures of the finished products. Well, that was kind of a long one today, but it's really important in starting to understand the features of art and in becoming a better artist yourself. So I hope you enjoyed that, and as I said, please have your parents take pictures of what you created and have them send it to me. I would love to see what you guys are doing while you're at home. Everyone take care, and I'll see you again soon.